What are you most excited for? This is your first series that is completely self-published.
Yeah, through Image Comics.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not very good on camera.
It's fine, I'm not either.
Guitar amps are cool.
The guitar amps are cool. They make me a more legit artist.
I know, they are cool. Yeah, so you do remember the time when you wanted to give up guitar, and I remember we were shooting hoops together out on the playground, and you said, I think I'm going to give up guitar. I'm not really getting anything out of it. I said, no, I don't think you should. So, you know, while I told you you couldn't make a living drawing spaceships, I didn't let you give up guitar.
Okay, so if you can, try not to move your chair too much.
Okay. Am I looking into the camera? Am I looking at you?
Do you know what kind of tools I like to use at the drawing table?
You really like microns. You really love jet pens. You love to buy those erasers and then use half of it and then throw the other half somewhere in your studio.
All right, so the thing that's interesting is as you're doing the power bomb here. It's like
Do a power bomb.
do a power bomb. Like, you know, I've watched some pro wrestling with you, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't really look real. These guys are like standing up there talking about how great they are.
Yep.
You know, just talking trash,
Yep.
which, you know, like you can tell they're just like making crap up as they talk.
Sure.
So I'm like, what's the appeal? Like, you know, we both like baseball and we like some other stuff where like people are really competing and trying to be good. And then in pro wrestling, it's like kind of half of a sport or something.
Okay, well, I kind of come back on that with, we don't just like sports together, we also like movies, right?
Yeah.
And movies are, you know, there's a lot of people like saying how great they are. Things look more real, but there's the benefit of the camera and stunt doubles.
Yeah.
And it's also completely scripted. Every piece of that movie has been mapped out like to a T, like the color, it's all been perfectly, you know.
All right, I buy that.
Yeah. Okay, so pro wrestling is kind of like a mixture of sports, which I love, which has that competitive nature, and movies and kind of over-the-top stuff that couldn't actually happen, where you're getting kind of a scripted sport. And it does require some imagination and a turning off of the brain because, yeah, it's like at the end of the day, somebody did decide who will win this wrestling match. But the way that you get there is the interesting part and the lead-in to that conflict, just like in a movie. Because when you watch Lord of the Rings, like you pretty much know the bad guys aren't going to win, but you still enjoy how evil is defeated. Pro wrestling has that kind of larger-than-life attitude and way of approaching things that you can tell these like really awesome stories that's also in a new and fresh kind of environment that's not just movies or TV shows or even comics. It's like real life. And even though sometimes things might not look super real, every time a wrestler steps in the ring, they're kind of like putting their bodies on the line. And there's this like real high stakes, real life high stakes to the drama and storytelling that you don't even have with like a movie. This is great. This is working great. It is actually, for real. My mom is really uncomfortable. She doesn't like being in front of the camera, so, but I think she's gonna do great. Can you tell them the story of my first Wizard World in 2012, and I didn't have enough money to pay for the whole table, which was like $500.
Oh, and I told you I'd pay for... I don't think I paid for the whole table.
No.
I wrote you a check for part of the table.
You wrote me a check for like $200
$200 or
$250, something like that.
Because I didn't want, you know, you not to be able to do it because you didn't have enough money to do it. So you always remembered that I wrote you a check for $200.
But I remember the day the AEW wrestling wrestler action figures and the wrestling ring arrived. And you were so gleeful. You said, Rachel, this is for Do A Powerbomb. This is reference. I had to buy this.
I did have to buy this.
And I knew you had been waiting years to tell me that.
I am an adult. I have 2 children. And I'm about to pay my mortgage after this video.
You're great at the music, and I remember when you were at North Park here in Chicago, right down, just a few blocks down the street now. You had a concert where you sang, you wrote some songs,
I mean, yes.
and you sang. Yeah, I remember I came there for that.
Those songs weren't that good.
I thought they were amazing, actually.
You're saying too many nice things about me. The whole interview is just going to be you talking about how cool I am. Okay, how long did it take you to read Wonder Woman Dead Earth from start to finish?
I don't know. I've read all the pages as they were in page form.
I mean, the actual comic.
I don't know, not long.
I have a question about Do a Powerbomb. So are you expecting that your audience will just be wrestling fans, or do you think other readers will be interested in?
I think there is a huge overlay between people who like comic books and people who like pro wrestling. It just seems like they're kind of in the same world. But I have never, whenever I make a book, I never assume that comic book fans are going to be into whatever I'm into. So the goal was to be as inviting as possible, so even people that don't know anything about wrestling would still be able to enjoy the book.
Okay. Popcorn questions. I don't know.
Start with something easy, like what's my favorite color? You remember reading Murder Falcon, and you don't have to really like metal to like Murder Falcon, right? Would you say that?
Yeah, definitely.
So, at the same way with Do a Powerbomb, I personally don't think that anybody has to like pro wrestling in order to enjoy the story. I think there's action, there's drama, there's like family dynamics. It's got all that good stuff, that good sauce that makes for a good story. And pro wrestling is just kind of the window dressing.
Here comes our other child.
Oh, hello, Fiona.
Hi. What are you doing, Daddy?
So have any of the wrestlers that you've met and that you've talked to about your upcoming story given you some feedback or thought about it, like, oh man, that's so dope, or like, it's so lame?
Well, I haven't had any wrestlers tell me to my face that it's lame. I have sent out some PDFs to different wrestlers, and they all seem to like it. So I'm not sure. I don't have any like friends who are wrestlers. I do have one guy that I'm not friends with him, but I'm an acquaintance with Christopher Daniels. He's a big comic book fan.
Yeah.
He wrestles on AEW, and he read the comic and he said it was awesome. So I'm just going to take him at face value. Thank you, Christopher Daniels.
That's cool.
Do you want me to ask the question again?
No, I'll just...
So is there a story of passion like embedded in Do a Powerbomb, like there is with Beta Ray Bell and Murder Falcon? There's obviously going to be a lot of cool pro wrestling stuff with people smashing each other's heads in, and like lifting up the chair and like smashing it over somebody's head, and
Right.
throwing them out of the ring,
Right.
like the stuff you see. But there's got to be something more than that, right?
Right. So it's based around a girl who's 11 years old at the start of this story. Her name's Lona Steel Rose, and she goes to see her mother, Yua Steel Rose, who's the Tokyo Grand Pro Wrestling heavyweight champion of the world. Lona Steel Rose watches her mom go through this like really intense match, and what happens in that match actually affects her for the rest of her life, and causes her to make some really intense and really crazy decisions leading in towards the end of the issue, and onto the rest of the series. There's also a necromancer. That's all I can really say about story beats without giving anything away. But I personally think that there's plenty of feelings to kind of get us through the story and make us care.
So, what do you think has been the most challenging part of Do a Powerbomb?
Well, making a story out of nothing is always the hardest part of any project, but drawing like the pro wrestling fight scenes and drawing the moves is really, really hard, because you're always kind of trying to get more space out of a page than what it wants to give you. And sometimes pro wrestling moves don't make sense unless you like really spell it out visually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Is it okay if I tell Dad a story?
Yeah, it's okay if you tell them a story.
Sure.
Once upon a time, there's poop and pee
Okay, great.
and pay
Okay, let's cut.
So in Powerbomb, you're producing this yourself, basically, right?
Yep.
So you came up with the story, you came up with the idea, you're doing you're paying yourself to do the artwork, and then you're working with Mike. Again.
Spicer, yep.
Mike's awesome, by the way.
He's
I
awesome.
mean,
Thank you, Mike.
I mean, Mike, I'm a huge fan. You know, when I look at the way you color Dan's work, I just can't believe how powerful it is. It's really something. And then Russ, are you working with Russ?
Russ Wooten again,
yeah,
yep.
And the lettering. I didn't even know lettering was a thing in comic books. I just thought, you know, people just like did it. And it's like, it's so cool as
Yeah,
well.
that's a thing.
So you're putting the whole thing together. So what do you think? Are you nervous? Are you excited? Or
I'm pretty nervous. I partnered with Skybound on my previous books like Murder Falcon and Extremity, and now I'm all on my own. And if the book doesn't do well, then I don't do well. If the book does well, then I do well. And yes, I mean, actually my palms are sweating about it now that I'm thinking about it.
Well, I don't like wrestling, but I know I'm going to like Do a Powerbomb.
Speaking of Rachel, I'm going to do her intro next. Would you send her in for me?
yeah.
Thanks,
totally.
Dad.
All right, Dan.
Okay.